Hello everyone. Welcome to the Tim Booker channel. Wishing you all an enjoyable listening experience. Today, I want to talk to you about a book by American social psychologist David Dunning titled Self-Insight, with the subtitle Roadblocks and Detours on the Path to Knowing Thyself. In this book, Dunning explores why our self-assessments often deviate from reality and what errors we need to correct to achieve true self-awareness. He also delves into the thought processes we should employ in our daily work and life. I'm sure many of you are familiar with situations like contestants on talent shows who may lack skill but possess unwavering self-confidence. Similarly, in the online world, many individuals comment on various hot topics using their perceived common sense, often distrusting expert explanations and taking a moral high ground when evaluating others. Moreover, in our own lives, we may encounter situations where we overestimate our abilities and later realize our actual performance falls short of our expectations. How can we explain this perplexing phenomenon? David Dunning, the author of this book, published a groundbreaking paper in 1999 with his student Kruger. They proposed the Dunning-Kruger effect, which suggests that individuals with lower performance tend to overestimate their abilities when engaging in a task. In 2021, Stanford University released an intriguing list ranking the most cited theories and concepts proposed by authoritative experts in various fields of study. David Dunning's name prominently appeared on the list of psychology experts. Dunning is a social psychology professor at the University of Michigan, focusing on human cognition and decision-making mechanisms. His research has shed light on the cognitive bias that leads to overestimating one's own abilities. Dunning's work highlights that achieving accurate and precise self-insight is deceptively simple but remarkably challenging. Recognizing ourselves correctly is the foundation for making informed decisions in our work and personal lives. Throughout human history, various civilizations have recognized the importance of assessing oneself accurately. For instance, the ancient wisdom inscribed in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi included the phrases, "nothing in excess," and "know thyself." David Dunning, as a psychologist, observed this phenomenon but was not content with merely identifying it. His curiosity drove him to further investigate the cognitive and socio-cultural mechanisms behind this tendency to overestimate oneself. He explored the methods and evaluation systems that can help individuals correct their self-assessment and make accurate self-predictions. By now, you might be genuinely interested in the content of this book. Therefore, let me guide you through the journey of self-awareness and correction that David Dunning has set out for us. It seems that behind many great discoveries in the history of science, there is a fascinating and often unbelievable story. Just as Isaac Newton's story involves sitting under an apple tree, watching an apple fall, and conceiving the theory of gravity, David Dunning's groundbreaking work on the Dunning-Kruger effect has its own intriguing origin. In January 1995, a bungling bank robber named MacArthur Wheeler committed 2 armed bank robberies in broad daylight in the Pittsburgh area, with no disguise or mask. He even smiled directly at security cameras. The police quickly arrested him based on surveillance footage. What was surprising was Wheeler's defense when apprehended. He claimed that he had covered his face with lemon juice because he believed it had invisible properties that would prevent his identification. This story of the most clueless bank robber quickly became widely known through the media. David Dunning, who was then teaching at Cornell University, read about Wheeler's absurd criminal actions and found it deeply thought-provoking. He saw Wheeler's ineptitude as a reflection of a cognitive dissonance prevalent in society. Many people, just like Wheeler, had a poor ability to assess their own skills and knowledge. This inability led them into a double bind, where they couldn't accurately perceive themselves or make improvements. You might think that such blunders are exclusive to individuals like Wheeler and that more accomplished or successful people are immune to this phenomenon. However, Dunning's research, involving experiments and studies, shows that this is not the case. He provides data that challenges this assumption. For example, in a survey of high school seniors, 60% of students believed their athletic abilities were above average within their class. Furthermore, 70% of these students thought their leadership skills were also above average. You might argue that teenagers are naturally overconfident, especially when dealing with the challenges of adolescence. You could assume that they will become more realistic about their abilities as they grow older and gain more life experience. However, Dunning presents statistics that challenge this notion. He conducted surveys with college professors and individuals planning to start their own businesses. Shockingly, 94% of college professors believed their professional competence in their research field was above average, while 33% of entrepreneurs were confident in their potential for business success. This data illustrates that overestimating one's abilities is not limited to specific age groups or levels of accomplishment. So, the psychological tendency to overestimate oneself is a prevalent phenomenon. How does this self-awareness discrepancy come about? As mentioned earlier, Dunning pointed out in his book that many people fail to understand how poor their skills and knowledge are because their self-assessment abilities are also flawed. Why is this the case? The ability to conduct accurate self-assessment requires insight and understanding of the knowledge and skills involved. This law is especially true in fields related to thinking and intelligence. For instance, an outstanding business manager is likely to have a deep understanding of the skills of all employees in their department, knowing who excels and who falls short. Conversely, individuals with lower proficiency in a certain knowledge domain or skill tend to overestimate themselves. For example, there are amateur researchers without professional qualifications who persistently submit materials to various national research institutions, claiming to single-handedly solve significant research problems or overturn fundamental theories. However, these so-called amateur scientists lack the professional expertise and knowledge required for their endeavors. To support this assertion, Dunning conducted an experiment. He took a group of college students and administered a logical reasoning ability test, dividing them into 4 groups based on their test scores. Dunning specifically chose the group with the lowest performance, the 13% of students with the poorest test scores, and asked them to evaluate their own performance. The results revealed that these low-performing students believed their scores should be ranked in the top 60%, and their estimated number of correct answers was significantly higher than their actual test results. So why can't we often perceive our own mistakes? Dunning offers 2 conjectures through his research. The first is that the inability to perceive our own errors is not due to ignorance but to flaws in our knowledge and the way we apply it. The second is that the fundamental logic of human thinking has some biases that hinder our ability to accept external feedback and learn from correct experiences. On the surface, with the advancement of information technology and the Internet, we access and acquire a significant amount of information and knowledge daily. In other words, humanity is becoming increasingly knowledgeable. However, when viewed collectively, the frequency of our mistakes has not decreased. The problem lies in the inherent flaws and inadequacies in our knowledge structure and the application of knowledge. In this book, author Dunning lists many such flaws and deficiencies, along with related psychological experiments. Due to time constraints, I will introduce 4 of the more important and common ones. The first flaw and shortcoming is that the knowledge or information we possess may have local rationality and logic but contains errors and biases when viewed globally. In other words, it's the so-called one leaf accounts for the whole forest phenomenon. For example, there is a widely circulated piece of information on food safety that claims eating persimmons and crabs together can lead to death. It is suggested that the vitamin C in persimmons reacts with the copper in crabs to produce a toxic substance called p-paradichlorobenzene, and a chemical equation is provided to make it seem scientific and logical. However, upon closer examination, this claim is baseless. Firstly, the oxidative reduction reaction required is extremely rigorous and can only be achieved in a specialized laboratory setting. It cannot occur within the human digestive system. Secondly, there's a famous saying in science communication, in toxicology, the dose makes the poison. Even if the reaction were possible, the amount of copper in a kilogram of crab is only about 0.5 milligrams. So, even under ideal conditions, such a reaction would require consuming 100 kilograms of crab at once to potentially result in toxic effects. The second flaw lies in the knowledge or thought patterns we possess, which are flawed, causing us to conduct rigorous reasoning and analysis but still arrive at incorrect conclusions. A classic example comes from World War II, involving a Hungarian Jewish mathematician named Abraham Wald. After escaping the Nazis in Europe, Wald moved to the United States and joined a statistical research group called the SRG, which worked with the U.S. government and Columbia University to provide analysis for military operations and wartime production. One day, the U.S. military approached them, stating that the Allied Air Force was suffering heavy losses over Europe, and they needed to improve the design of military aircraft by adding armor to enhance protection. However, they faced a dilemma. Adding armor everywhere on the plane would reduce its flight performance and bomb-carrying capacity. Wald's colleagues in the SRG believed that the armor should be added to the aircraft's body, which was the part with the most bullet holes and thus the most heavily damaged. But Wald insisted on a different approach. He pointed out that the theory of the survivorship bias had influenced his thinking. His colleagues' analysis appeared logically sound but was fundamentally flawed. He argued that, based on statistics from large data, in intense aerial combat, the probability of an enemy aircraft hitting each part of a plane is roughly the same. What's more, their analysis only considered the planes that survived and returned. The planes that were shot down and didn't return were not included in their data. From a statistical standpoint, the planes with the most bullet holes in the wings and body were the ones that didn't make it back, suggesting that these areas were not critical. Furthermore, based on the data from the surviving planes, even those with extensive damage to the wings and body were still able to return. This indicated that these areas were not as important as they seemed, and armor should not be added there. Wald's persistence led the military to adopt his suggestion, adding armor to the engines and fuel tanks. This greatly increased the survival rate of their aircraft. Wald's theory subsequently became a well-known statistical concept, the survivorship bias. The third flaw lies in the vast knowledge and information stored in our minds, some of which lack essential commonalities, making logical transitions difficult or indicating unrelated variables with no causality or mutual influence. Many people tend to overlook this and forcefully link them together, resulting in common logical fallacies such as erroneous attribution and inappropriate analogy. An example of erroneous attribution is the so-called pirate fallacy. Over the past few centuries, the global pirate population has decreased, while global temperatures have been rising. Some people mistakenly attribute this rise in global temperatures to the decrease in the number of pirates, claiming that pirates can lower global temperatures. As for inappropriate analogy, there's a popular internet joke that illustrates this concept. It tells the story of a student caught cheating during an exam, who defends themselves by saying, lawyers can look at case files during trials, and architects can refer to blueprints when constructing buildings. Why can't I look at my books during the exam? This analogy fails to consider the differences in contexts and appropriateness. The fourth flaw, referred to as the misdirection of repetition by Dunning, is akin to the logical fallacy known as the parade of horribles. Essentially, if people are continually exposed to a specific category of information, no matter how absurd, they may gradually perceive it as real and rational. This phenomenon is evident when rumors, even those without scientific basis, are continuously circulated, like the claim that the Apollo 11 moon landing was a hoax or that drinking purified water causes memory loss. Dunning explains that due to inherent biases in human thinking, we tend to selectively believe information that aligns with our interests or preconceived notions while rejecting or ignoring conflicting information. To illustrate this point, he mentions a psychological experiment where volunteers were subjected to a tomato test, claiming that if a tomato sample changed color, they were diagnosed with a rare disease. The volunteers immediately became anxious when they saw their tomato samples change color, some even refused to accept the results, demanded retests, and questioned the validity of the diagnosis. The experiment then introduced information that linked high or low blood sugar to test accuracy, causing some volunteers to request immediate blood sugar tests, but those whose tomato samples did not change color remained unaffected by this additional information. Furthermore, humans have a cognitive bias that tends to attribute success to one's actions, but failures are often attributed to external factors, even blaming coworkers or partners. This attitude leads to an unrealistic perception of our abilities and the value of our resources. This inclination stems from our desire to alleviate the anxiety of mortality by thinking of ourselves as unique individuals immune to death and other calamities. While this psychological defense mechanism helps us cope with the fear of death, it has the side effect of preventing us from making accurate self-assessments. Author Dunning further explained that in his research, he conducted numerous psychological tests, and almost all the test subjects believed that they possessed more positive character traits than others. These traits include self-discipline, politeness, cooperation, exceptional problem-solving skills, insightful ideas as if inspired, and the ability to control situations and influence outcomes. For example, many horse racing gamblers tend to become more convinced that the horses they bet on will win after placing their bets. This over-optimism is rooted in their belief that they have a unique insight into identifying the most likely winning horses. This unfounded optimism can be attributed to several factors. First, people believe in their unique perspective and their ability to pick the winning horses. Second, after placing their bets, the psychology of loss aversion instinctively leads gamblers to reject negative information that might indicate potential losses. Similarly, many lottery players insist on drawing and announcing the winners themselves, believing that their participation gives them control over the outcome and higher odds of winning. However, from another perspective, our difficulty in drawing lessons from experiences and improving self-awareness is due to the complexity of the external world. Dunning explains that while our actions and decisions indeed lead to specific results and receive feedback from the external environment, the complexity of our social surroundings means that the feedback we receive can be influenced by multiple variables, and our information is often limited. Therefore, external feedback often fails to provide deeper insights into the essence of events, preventing us from accumulating accurate experiences. For instance, two sets of parents using different methods to discipline their naughty children may both witness improved behavior in their children the next day. They may assume that their respective methods were effective and continue to use them. However, they might overlook the long-term psychological and behavioral consequences of their disciplinary choices, as well as the temporary nature of the child's misbehavior. Despite the potential challenges associated with self-assessment, Dunning offers a way forward. He suggests that self-assessment, like any other skill, can be improved with proper guidance and training. To enhance self-awareness, we should first address the misconceptions about the quantity, structure, and application of our knowledge and undertake cognitive training to reinforce our knowledge structure. Secondly, we should strive to enhance our understanding of the external world by actively collecting more details about the environment and objectively evaluating their impact. Many people make decisions and take actions without comprehensive knowledge of their environment and their own conditions. Dunning warns that a lack of information and overoptimism can lead to unexpected challenges. For instance, he mentions the case of mountain climbers attempting to conquer Mount Everest. Nearly 1,700 professional climbers ascended the mountain in 2001. Of those, 1,496 reached the summit and returned safely, while 172 tragically lost their lives. Despite their expertise, the climbers faced extreme conditions, including a lack of sleep, low oxygen levels, sub-zero temperatures, and strong winds. When climbers approach the summit, they must traverse a nearly vertical obstacle known as the Hillary Step. Their fatigue and the severity of the conditions make overcoming this obstacle extremely difficult. Furthermore, due to adverse weather conditions and the limits of human physiology, climbers are required to turn back and descend around 3 p.m., regardless of their proximity to the summit. Some climbers may have difficulty assessing whether they can maintain their usual performance under these harsh conditions. As a result, they may overestimate their ability to overcome difficulties, leading to severe consequences, ranging from failed attempts to loss of life. To avoid such misjudgments, Dunning recommends gathering as much information as possible about the external environment, preparing for the worst-case scenario, and accounting for potential negative emotions that may arise due to adverse circumstances. For example, elite units like the U.S. Navy SEALs undergo extreme training scenarios, including Hell Week, which consists of 6 days of continuous physical and combat training, involving cold and wet conditions, challenging physical activities, and lack of sleep. This rigorous training aims to ensure that soldiers can maintain their combat capabilities even in the harshest conditions. Secondly, Dunning advises us to eliminate the influence of the endowment effect in our actions and decisions. This means overcoming the psychological bias we discussed earlier, where we tend to overvalue our own abilities, qualities, and wealth resources. To counteract this cognitive bias and make more effective and rational decisions in our daily lives, career planning, and financial investments, many experts have provided insights and explanations in their columns and courses. We won't go into details here, but let's consider a simple example. If you have an old piece of furniture or an outdated household appliance that you bought at a relatively high cost but is now worn, taking up space, and causing annoyance, you might hesitate to dispose of it because of the pain of parting with something you invested in. However, if you reverse your perspective and imagine you don't own it and were considering buying it, you'd likely assign a much lower value, perhaps just a few dollars, or even less, which might not cover the cost of removal by a recycling company. This hesitation to part with the item stems from the endowment effect, causing us, as the owners, to unintentionally overestimate its value, thus overestimating the potential loss of giving it up. If we could regularly shift our perspective to evaluate possessions as potential buyers, our valuation of the item would be closer to its real worth. So, that's the essence of why less knowledgeable individuals tend to be more confident. In this book, Dunning, using his remarkable insights and years of psychological research, delves deep into this interesting and widespread social psychological phenomenon. He gradually reveals the cognitive errors, misconceptions, and underlying reasons behind our tendency to overestimate ourselves in assessments. Dunning believes that there are two primary reasons why we struggle to assess ourselves correctly, resulting in errors in our behavior and decision-making. The first reason is the flaws in our knowledge and how we apply it, which prevent us from arriving at accurate conclusions and recognizing our mistakes. For instance, our knowledge and information may be incomplete, have partial correctness, or we may forcefully connect unrelated information, assuming they share commonalities or causal relationships. The second reason is the inherent cognitive biases in human thinking that hinder us from accepting external feedback and learning from correct experiences. For example, we tend to believe information and experiences that favor us, overestimate the impact of our decisions, and misunderstand our influence on the final outcome of events. In the final part of the book, Dunning presents strategies to enhance our knowledge structure and application, improve formal assessments, and learn from experiences. These strategies include reinforcing our knowledge structure and cognitive training, avoiding common thinking errors, and collecting detailed information about the external environment. Additionally, we should consider the worst-case scenarios and account for our emotional and physical fluctuations as relevant variables in our assessments. Dunning also acknowledges that maintaining a degree of self-confidence and optimism in our self-assessment can have positive effects. People who moderately overestimate themselves often leave a better first impression, make more significant progress compared to those with low self-esteem, and exhibit better psychological resilience in adversity. They also tend to experience higher levels of happiness. However, it's essential to be aware that both underestimating and overestimating oneself can have negative consequences. Therefore, Dunning advises us to consistently seek feedback from others, regardless of our self-assessment, as this is a crucial channel for self-improvement and adjusting our self-awareness. In essence, our self-assessment is like a mirror, and sometimes, it distorts the reflection. To gain a better understanding of ourselves, we need to look into several mirrors to create a more comprehensive and objective image. As Dunning concludes, the journey to improving our self-awareness is akin to climbing a challenging and adventurous mountain, far more difficult than we might imagine. Nevertheless, when we reach the magnificent view from the summit, we'll realize that all the effort was worthwhile. This summarizes the key points of the book. Congratulations on completing another book, and thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Together, let's combine wisdom and practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future. Thank you, and goodbye.